Good morning, Alchemists. I'm Aubrey Forrest, the Modern Alchemist, and this is the Modern Alchemist channel, and you're on Alchemy Journal. Alright, I decided to find a nice high location in town where I could take a look at the horizon over the mountains over there that you can see. And I wanted to give you all an opportunity to consider the question I mentioned in my first video, which related to a scripture involving the creation. Specifically, that the evening and the morning was the first day, and also the second, and the third, and the fourth, and that Sabbath is observed beginning with the evening. All Sabbath days start in the evening, if you're Jewish. So, what's that about? Well, let's take a look at the sky here as we look around. Behind me, up here, that's our immediate star, right behind the tree there. I don't want to blow out my camera, but you can see it. We call it the sun. and if we look around, actually, in the sky, what do we see? Yeah, we see nothing. So, yeah, it is the sun, right? It is the only star that we are able to see right now. That's it. So, in astrotheological terms, our ancestors looked at all these large celestial bodies, and these they called gods. So that is the god Apollo up there. Others have referred to it as Set, or Lucifer, or Quetzalcoatl. This is Adonai Elohim. So, anyway, this particular star within this also represents the center of every mythology. For instance, King Arthur represents that star. As we look around, I want you to just think for a moment. What are you looking at right now? That's blue sky. In fact, it's a beautiful blue sky day today. But if you really think about it, this is nothing. This is about as close to what nothing looks like as I could give you, except for the fact that this is a blue nothing. So if it were actually nothing, there would be nothing to actually see. But this is about as close as you can get. From this vantage point and perspective, the only things that exist in the entire universe are the Earth and those of us standing on it, and that star right there, which we call the sun. The sky is blue. This blue sky relates to other symbolism associated with this star and the war that star wages against the other gods, which would be celestial bodies out there. Other planets, perhaps even other stars. For our immediate observation, though, let's take a look at linguistics in the English language just for a moment as we look at the edge line of the horizon here. And evening, what is that about? Well, when this star gets close to the horizon on the west, its light and its influence is dramatically diminished. In fact, it is evened so that if there were other celestial bodies near enough in proximity to be seen, now they too would be seen. Those are the old gods. This is the new god. So as those, from an electric universe perspective, our ancestors looked up, and when they saw the daytime sky, they most likely saw other bodies common in our own solar system, specifically Jupiter, Saturn. Those are probably visible, most certainly. And when you study the mythologies and you recognize exactly what Saturn is related to, you're welcome to check out thunderbolts.org on YouTube. Those scientists are positively awesome, and they'll give you a much clearer perspective of all of this. This idea that our mythologies are based on actual events that our ancestors experienced, and that if you study these mythologies from a practical standpoint, as I do, not simply an academic standpoint, what you'll see is that they are descriptive of your own conscious process. So when the sun rises, or in this case, when the sun raises, and to raise means to destroy or bring things absolutely to destruction, right? That sun obliterates the truth. Every star, every planet, anything that we would want to see in the sky right now is no longer visible. This star would have us believe that it is the only thing out there in the universe, and that without it, we'd all perish. Well, the last part is absolutely true, but it is not the only thing in the universe, even though, in fact, this is apparently what it would be like if that were the case 24 hours a day. If you were able to keep up with the rotational pattern of the Earth, right, run fast enough so that the sun was always up in the sky, you'd never see starlight. You'd never know that there were other planets in our solar system. You wouldn't even think to look. I want you to consider that now in relationship to other mythologies. The slaying of the bull, the passage of the day boat, and realize that the telling of these mythologies, as has been given by modern academicians based on Victorian ideals, principles, and understandings of those monotheistic structures, don't account actually accurately for the actual voyage of the day boat. They have it backwards because they fail to understand the effect of Apep on consciousness. This chaos serpent Apep, with its many, many heads rearing up all over the place, and which, of course, the gods now are in contest with, that serpent is actually the effect of this star on consciousness and upon life on this planet. As I've discussed in other videos, the idea of Cancer being associated with the zodiac sign of July, and those born in that zodiac, myself included, is a representation of how nature responds when the light of this immediate star is at its height, which would be in the month of July, right? And when the greatest illumination exists. And at that point, nature is growing without restraint, virtually to the damage of its own systems in many cases, hence Cancer. Similarly, the human body calls Cancer a unrestrained growth of cells which ordinarily would function properly, but now are receiving coating which causes them to grow in such a way that it damages the organism on the whole. Everything that I will talk about on this channel ultimately will have resonance in an application of human consciousness. That's what this is all about. And the reason for this is simple. When we consider human consciousness, we recognize that our environment has an immediate impact on our consciousness. We know this. When it's cloudy outside, some of us get blue. When you walk around and stub your toe, suddenly you're thinking of nothing else but the welfare of your toe. When you're hungry or perhaps suffering from dysentery, the only thing that you're going to think about is either eating or getting to a restroom in time to not soil yourself. Your consciousness is often influenced, if not almost always exclusively, it would seem, influenced by the conditions of your environment. And depending upon who you read, that would be either ratified or disavowed in whole or in part. I tend to see it as a blending of the two, because I recognize also that since we are custodians of consciousness, we have a capacity to nuance what we experience in such a way as to exhibit a degree of exercise over our environment. So just as much as human consciousness can be altered by the constraints of its environment, so too the environment can be altered by the rigors and constraints and disciplines of the mind living and residing within that consciousness field. You can change the world around you just by the way you think. That's basically what I'm trying to tell you. And I'm not getting fluffy bunny here. I'm recognizing that there is a symbiotic relationship existent between myself and this star as most immediate expression of consciousness. Because everything on this planet subsists and survives as a result of this star. Everything. There is nothing on this planet that would live, thrive, or exist without the benefit of this star. Not as you see it today, at least. I'm sure that we could probably find, and with the current probe out to Pluto, we're demonstrating that, in fact, the universe has a whole bunch of ways of subsisting life without the benefit of a star being right on top of it. But as you see it here, as we see it as it exists now, this is an expression of our proximity to this electromagnetic source, which is, of course, consciousness. And our minds, our bodies, everything that we have depends upon that source of electromagnetism to keep it going, to keep things moving, to make the atmosphere what it is, the water what it is, everything what it is. So we are an expression and an extension of that. But our ancestors recognized that we are functioning imperfectly relative to this new source of consciousness. Much like taking a toaster that was built in the United States and then trying to plug it into European current. Yeah, the toaster might work for a while, but it definitely is going to burn out in short order. And in fact, that is what we are experiencing here. The recognition that the source of our consciousness power, the source of our active consciousness, whatever it was that kept us going, diminished over time, and that we are now slave to circadian rhythms that are bound specifically to this source of electromagnetism. And that when we're separated from this source, we become physically ill, as has been demonstrated by multiple studies wherein circadian rhythms have been violated or in some way augmented through diminishment of environmental input. Yeah, anyway, this is what we're going to wind up talking about, but I just wanted you to take a look and recognize this is what nothing looks like. And that makes this star become the great deceiver. This is the father of lies, right here. That's it. Scripturally, if you were to look at it, because the first and only lie, the big one, is that it's it, that there's nothing else out here but it. And yet we know that's not true. We know that it's a broader universe and we're part of it and participants in it. So, consider that. Now, consider the color blue. Blue is associated with combat. In fact, war-bearing nations will use the color blue in their national ensigns. And countries which are not interested in warfare typically will not have blue incorporated anywhere on their flag. So, our color blue comes from this god waging war on the other gods, and the victory sign is the color blue, because the entire sky now is awash in this color like a complete veil of consciousness, showing its dominance and residence until at last the sun eventually sets. And hence the phrase, the sun is set, is yet another clue as to the nature of the mythological archetype associated with the sun and the chaos that resides as a result of its influence. All right, so that's just a brief discussion. There's so much more to talk about, but I just wanted to kind of open your mind just a little bit and give you a thought about human consciousness and the color blue and the nature of this star, the sun, the only sun that is visible right now in the heavens, and the idea of nothingness. That if you need in meditation to actually focus on what nothing is, make a day like this a priority and stare into this sky. Just focus on the absolute nothing that is out there and let that write itself onto your consciousness as a point of strength and clarity, so that when you are stuck amid the chaos, when you're hip deep in it, all you have to do is clear your mind and recognize that the prevailing source of consciousness uses this color to demonstrate its dominance over chaos and its assertion of power. And you can draw that color to you, assert your personal power, and be a better alchemist by transmuting your circumstance into something more favorable to the outcome of all involved. Because ultimately, the idea of knowing yourself means to understand yourself in association with your context, and that context in your environment. And when you realize that you are inseparable from your environment, your immediate instinct is, out of enlightened self-interest, is to mediate conflict, to eliminate struggle, and to seek out resolution of hardship. And all of that is born often from ignorance and lack of understanding. All right, alchemist, I gotta go. I will talk to you later. Beautiful day here in Olympia, Washington.